the head of LucasArts says, John, I need you to do an episode 2 game. All right, but I will not do a game of the movie. I get to do something original. Are we okay with that? He's like, yes, we're okay with that. And it's not going to come out with the movie because we don't have time. Like we'd already left that window, and it's like, well, it has to come out with the DVD. That gives us 18 months. All right, fine. So that's how Bounty Hunter came about. Was this idea to it begrudgingly pulled me back in, but it was again a chance to play with Boba Fett, even if it's Jango Fett, in a world that I really enjoyed playing in. Even if it was the prequels world, I didn't have to focus on the story of the movie, didn't have to focus on the all that stuff. I could just go into the seedy underbelly of Star Wars again, which is where I wanted Shadows to take place, right?
Yeah.
And Jango's just a dude, doing his job, and also answer the questions that the movie posed, which was, why did they choose Jango Fett to be the template for the clone army, and why did he end up with a clone of himself as a son?
I was going to ask you that. Okay, so how much of you had creative control of that? That's a big thing to be tasked with.
I had total creative control.
Holy cow,
although
that's crazy.
It came with some rules, which was, this is a world that George is still making up, right? And so it had to get through him. And so I was told, the best way to do this, since he's really busy, is write down some questions, 10 or 15 questions, send him an inter-office mail, which is scary. Like the first, we all had inter-office mail envelopes, these manila envelopes, and you'd write down the nickname or the address of the person you send it to. And I wrote GWL, and when you write GWL, George Walton Lucas, it's going to him. First, it's going to his secretary or his administrative assistant, and then it's going to him. So I wanted to be very careful about what I put down there. But I had 10 or 15 questions in there that he would answer yes or no to. That was the best way for him to do it.
Do you remember anything that was on that list?
Oh, I remember most of them. Can I explain the origins of the Slave One? Can I explain why Jango wanted a son? Can I give Jango a Toydarian handler, because we'd already come up with like a female Watto to be kind of his, because Jango doesn't express his doubts or fears because he's just a badass. So you need somebody else to do that for him if you want to have that hero journey where he can't be like Luke and go, oh, I can never be a Jedi, I need to get home. Jango can't be, God, I can't go after a deranged Jedi. That's too dangerous. I might die. So you need somebody to do that for him. So that's where Rosada came from. And there's some other questions like that. And then one of the questions was, could I explore death sticks as kind of a MacGuffin for the seedy underbelly of Star Wars? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. But one of the things I asked was, can I make this about revenge? And that's when George actually didn't just write yes or no. He wrote in the margins, and he said, keep it about the money, which I thought was amazing feedback. It kind of brought me back to he's a bounty hunter. He does this for money. And when I asked, can I explain why Jango wanted a son? And I posed some thoughts of my own about that. Like maybe something happened when he was a kid and, he wanted to make up for it or whatever. And he said, hey, Jango's, he's a mercenary. He wrote longhand again. I can't remember word for word what it was, but he's a mercenary, but he loves his son just like anybody else. Right.
Wow.
So he's sentimental. And I thought that was good because it made me think of Jango as not a villain, right? He is a villain in the movie. That is his only purpose, and he dies for that. But in our game, he was the hero, and so for him, Boba was the ultimate treasure. The thing that he didn't know he wanted, but he's a guy with a dangerous life. He's got all this money that he's making, but what's it all for at the end of the day? And I think George was saying that he wants to pass on a legacy just like anybody else. And that's where Boba came from. And so that was, when I got that feedback, I just started writing the story.
Oh, it's so awesome.
and then I got to work with ILM closely. It's not the first time we worked with ILM. There was a lot of back and forth working on episode 1 Racer, where I would take the cartridge over to Jon Knoles at ILM, and I'd say, "Hey John, we got a version of the game. Just check it out. Let us know what you think." And he'd play it, and he'd see the flaps moving open and close on the Anakin's pod racer, and he goes, "Wow, I didn't realize you guys would think of it that way. You know, we were going to think of it another way." And so for them, it was fun to see the problems we were trying to solve in gameplay would affect how they did things in the movie, where the pod didn't just swing around like a thing at the end of a string. It led the engines, because you're driving the engine. So
it's like
you move. Yeah, you move first. Well, the horses actually moved the chariot first. Chariot didn't steer, but in our game, when you crank the stick, you see a flap open up. The pod starts to torque to the right, and then the engines, go with it and point in that way. And that we had to figure that out all in the game before they did it in the movie, and I think it was helpful to them. So when I got the chance to, when we were going to do cinematics for Bounty Hunter, the team that had just done The Incredible Hulk, I think the first, not The Incredible Hulk, but Hulk.
Yeah.
They were kind of left at a position where they'd either be laid off, a lot of them, because there wasn't another project coming, or we'd get to give them some work to do, and we'd get a deal. And George actually made it clear that it should be like ILM can't charge us what they would charge other people. He's like, "Hey, I set you guys up for a reason." So we got a great deal out of it. I mean, it was expensive, but it wasn't anywhere near as expensive as it would have been if we were some other company. And that's because it was keeping it in the family and keeping these people working so that they would be able to go on to the next film. And so it was great. We got a lot of people who had never done, ILM had never done a full animated feature before. It had only been CG on live action plates. So Bounty Hunter was, I believe, literally the first project ILM ever did that was all animation.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
the cinematics are so good. They really are.
They were great. And it was fun because when I got called into dailies, which was, I used to observe this when we were invited to dailies and for the prequels, and George and Jon Knoles and all these other people would be sitting around and talking about things, and you just be silent and take it in. Then I got to be the director in the chair, and everybody's looking at me like, "Hey, what do you think, John?" I was like, "Well, it's really cool." I wish I could be more, provide more critique, but everything they did was amazing. And then I got Tamira Morrison and Clancy Brown to do the voice, and Lucille Bliss to be Rosada. I mean, she was Mighty Mouse in the 50s. I mean, this woman is legend. And Smurf, Mama Smurf, Smurfette, sorry. And that was fun. Because and I kind of wish we had ironed out some issues with the gameplay, the camera specifically, but as a piece of standalone Star Wars lore and story, I was grateful that George allowed me to. That was another question I'd asked him, was, can I apply some of the now defunct Boba legends and Mandalorian lore and all that stuff onto Jango Fett? And he said, absolutely. So, and I know they've since thrown all that out and called it not canon, but at the time it was fun to be able to just come up with, just to resurrect some of those ideas.
Yeah, it's wild. And it what you may find interesting is that my 8-year-old son, who plays PlayStation 4 and is hoping that PS5 shows up under the tree this year for Christmas for him, he took to, when they did the remastered, the reissued version of Bounty Hunter, he took to that game and he played it from beginning to end. Like, he fell in love with that game. So an 8-year-old in 2020 is still playing that game. It's still one of the, it still works.
That painful camera though, doesn't it? It's just like all the games I've worked on, there's like one or two things about them I just wish I could go back and change. And we did change it. If you have the Japanese version of that game, it's called Star Wars Jango Fett for the PlayStation 2. that version of the game, and it only works. I don't know how you get your hands on it, but we found a bug in the camera code that made the camera just way too twitchy and springy, and it just multiplied the effect. And we were afraid to change it so late. But in Japan, we were advised that, that as a culture, they really, really have a problem with twitchy cameras. I mean, we should have the same problem with it too, but
Right.
they really didn't want us to ship that game unless we fixed it. So we did, and that shipped a little bit later. Yeah. And the GameCube version, I think, tamed it a little bit as well. But the Japanese version will not cause you so much grief.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Blast Doors. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Beyond the Blast Doors, a Star Wars conversation.